Well, you know what that sound means. God, that sound means it's time to shut off your podcast. Is what it means. And sound means it's time to go to bed. Yeah, we're done here. Get out of here. No, that sound means that I am your friend Joseph Craven, and that's Keith Big Boss Harkins, and this is Keith. What is it?
Running out the clock.
Dang Skippy, I got a drumstick in my hand, mint ice cream flavored drumstick. Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's what's up.
Yep. Drumstick in my hand. I've been listening to nothing but Jeremy Renner's music all day long, so I'm pumped right now.
Wait, what? He has music?
Yeah, it's not great.
No, it's Jeremy Renner. What? I'm so confused.
Yeah. I mean, he's talented. It's just not great. It's not my style.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's in Jeep commercials these days. Anyway,
I was wondering if that was actually him singing. Now I know that it is.
Yeah, that's actually his music. I knew he had been singing for a while, but I never really listened to it. I thought it was kind of a Russell Crowe and his old band, 30-odd Foot of Grunts type of situation.
Well, when Thanos snaps away your family and you've got 5 years to, you take up some hobbies.
Yeah, you figure out new things to do with your time. And in his case, he became a... See, in some early commercials, on like the way it was portrayed, I was like, oh, he's kind of like jazzy crooner type singing, because I remember him being in some, I don't know, it was like a whiskey commercial years ago, and it showed him like step on stage with like a whiskey in hand. He's like, well, I guess I'll go sing, And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then he puts out his own music, and it's like knockoff Imagine Dragons, which is already garbage music, in my opinion, anyway. Mm-hmm. So,
man, that Jeep commercial was hilarious. Like, like Matthew McConaughey does like the Lincoln commercials, and like Lincoln's are nice cars, like he walks out to like a Lincoln, gets in. It's like an emotional experience for him as he starts it.
Yep.
And then you have Jeremy Renner stepping out of the club and off the sidewalk and rounding the corner of a brand new Jeep. Mm-hmm. Like, all right, Jeep.
It's just like, it's like him and a bunch of bros. And they're just like, I mean, it's exactly what happens anytime it's any of us walking out of like a restaurant to hop in my Jeep. And we've got like the top down in my Jeep Wrangler and all that. And everyone's just kind of like, whoa, just goofing off. Like there's nothing classy. There's nothing interesting about it. It's the least interesting car commercial in the history of car commercials.
Yep.
A genre of commercials that is all about overblowing how important it is. AKA the Matthew McConaughey, I don't always drive a Lincoln, but when I do, wait, why did I turn him into the world's most interesting man? I turned into a Matthew McConaughey Dos Equis. It was weird.
I was enthralled.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, all right. All that to say, welcome to our LSU preview. So we were supposed to record a preview of the Louisiana State football Tigers. Actually, they are officially known as the Fighting Tigers. So,
also, I don't hear Louisiana State University actually said out loud, but like,
no,
once a decade, it always throws me off.
Yeah, you're like, wait a second.
Like, wait, who?
Is that a directional school or no? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's always just because no one else is LSU, or as we always pronounce it, LSU.
LSU.
Spelled ELSHU. LSU.
LSU.
Mm-hmm. You never hear that. But they are officially the Louisiana State University Fighting Tigers. We were supposed to record our preview of them a few weeks ago, but something happened that I can't remember exactly what it was. What was it, Keith?
I feel like we were at a cabin and everyone was drunk.
Well, I just meant you got married.
That happened shortly after the cabin thing.
So, all right.
Yeah, it happened.
Well, congratulations, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So here I am trying to like play up the fact that, Keith got married and he just got back from that a week ago, and it's like newlywed bliss and all this stuff. And Keith just wants to talk about going out to the cabin in the woods for a bachelor party weekend.
Cabin in the woods, y'all. For Jules.
Shout out to Joss Whedon, former defensive coordinator of the Louisiana State University Fighting Tigers. So if there was a surprise team of the season, this podcast is starting off well, by the way. If there was a surprise team of the season last year, it was like a toss-up between LSU and Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were the
For
two
sure.
teams that you and I had the pleasure of trying to record preview podcast episodes about.
Yes.
So good for us. Two teams that were not expected to do anything, but did significantly better than anyone could have foreseen. In particular, we looked at LSU's schedule. We looked at what they had done in their first full season under Ed Orgeron, and expecting a bit of a fall off from that. We thought the schedule was really bad. Instead, they pulled out a 10-3 season. That included, accidental success. Included a Fiesta Bowl victory over, who did they play in the bowl game again? Over UCF, that's right. Defending national champions, Central Florida. But, I mean, they had victories over basically everyone that, I don't know. You would expect them to lose to Alabama, and they did. You would expect them to lose to Georgia. They beat Georgia. Mm-hmm. You know, you would expect them to beat Florida, even though Florida was ranked 20th at that point in time. Florida pulls off the upset. You would expect them to be able to beat Texas A&M. Instead, they get into a marathon and end up pulling out 7 overtime loss. So there are 3 losses. Out of their 3 losses, only one of them actually makes sense.
Right. Yep.
No disrespect to Florida in that regard, because Florida was a very, very good team last season. But LSU was the favored team in that matchup.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you look back on last season and LSU. I mean, what do you make of that? What made them so surprising?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it was the fact that Ed Orgeron went to Ole Miss. Gosh, what was that, 13 years ago now or something? It's been a while.
It was 1983, if I remember correctly.
The year was 1983. Ed Orgeron sprung forth from a cave in the bayou.
It was in the year of our Lord, 1983.
It had been a fortnight since Ed Orgeron had fed on goat flesh.
Yeah, I didn't think any podcast could get worse than mine and Rose Alabama episode, but we're already on track.
Yeah, no, we are racing past that one. Yeah. I think he carried over a lot of I guess bias from his time at Ole Miss. That didn't go well, obviously, right. and then he kind of took a step back and worked his way up, and so this was his first actual full-time head coaching gig back at a D1 school, and so
yeah.
I think a lot of people just expected that he was a good coordinator at USC, and he did good in an interim role. Same at LSU the year prior. He's a good interim coach. But when it's his team, he struggles. Well, we kind of found out that maybe he, while cutting his teeth at Ole Miss, actually learned some things. And I mean, it's obvious the players love him. Also helps that you have undisputed greatest quarterback of all time, Joe Burrow, on your team.
Yeah, no question. First team, first ballot All-American, Hall of Famer, Joe Burrow. Yeah.
Mm. And then there was the week 1 thing where they played Miami, and Miami was the heavy favorite because they were ranked 9th. And
right.
LSU put it on them pretty good. And so you're kind of wondering, is LSU good or is Miami terrible? And it turned out it was both.
Why not both?
Right. Why does it have to be an or? Let's throw an and in there.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of continued their stretch of surprise football until they lost a very close game against Florida. And by all accounts, probably should have won that game, if not for somewhat of a fourth quarter collapse by them. And then there's that Texas A&M game that was just maybe the weirdest but best game I've seen in a long time. That
Just
didn't
bizarre.
include any team that I liked. Yeah, it was because I was watching the new Tomb Raider movie, and
Okay, so this game was stranger than that fact that you were
yeah,
like, okay, all right.
well, it was towards the end of the game. LSU had kind of come back and looked like they had it in hand. So I switched over to to the movie and settled in for a long night of Alicia Vikander, or however you actually pronounce her name.
That's a good question, and I am not going to attempt it.
That's probably wise. And then I get like a Twitter notification basically saying that like people are talking about the game. So I'm like, all right, what's happening? And so like I didn't actually see like the really controversial play that happened. But yeah, so it goes to overtime. So I'm like switching back and forth, and then I end up just watching the game because it's in like by then and it's third overtime. And so whoever took the under in that game is very upset.
Right.
Because I think at the end of the game, it like both teams had scored like 30 points. By the end of overtime 7, both teams had scored 70 plus points.
It was it was a final of 74-72.
Yeah, so
Just 7 overtimes.
Yeah, so I guess back to the question. A lot of people thought that Orgeron was going to, sink the ship before it really got going. They had some questions on offense, like Joe Burrow was a transferred student who was coming into an offense that was trying to still find its identity with a new head coach. So there was a lot of room for what I would consider just criticism and maybe apprehension about what they were going to look like, and so I don't blame anybody for thinking they'll be a 6-win or 7-win team tops, and then they proved everybody wrong, and it was fun to see. I like Ed. I think he's a good coach. He had a bad situation at Ole Miss, so I'm glad that he's seems to be where he wants to be, doing what he wants to do, and is doing good at it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. One of the major things is that we didn't know anything about Ed Orgeron other than his stint at Ole Miss, because look, I've got like a golden rule of coaching that I try to follow when it comes to assessing coaches. When it comes to like when a coach leaves, like the transition period, I always say that you do not hire the interim.
Right.
You just don't. Because 9 times out of 10, the interim comes in, he's able to repair the damage that was done, so the team looks better, and then when he's hired full time, he collapses.
Ole Miss knows a little bit about that right now.
Right, that's they're hoping that Matt Luke does not implode on himself, right?
Right.
And so 9 times out of 10, that's the case. Ed Orgeron is apparently the 10th time. He is the exception that proves the rule in this instance, because he comes in his first full year where I think he was still technically he was not like, was the interim tag lifted after the season where he and Les Miles split time, or did he technically still have an interim tag in 2017? Do you remember?
I can't remember, because it was a weird situation when he came in.
So I felt like that it lingered a little bit, but I could be wrong on that. Either way, he comes in and has a 9-win season in 2017 and then a 10-win season last year. Along the way, he's doing all of that with kind of a lost art in the modern football game, that patented LSU power run offense behind guys like Leonard Fournette. That sort of thing's going on. They've got their signature, defensive standout players like last year's linebacker Devin White, who was incredible. They've got their signatures that LSU football is just synonymous with.
Right.
And he's doing all of that, and he's doing it well enough to get them 9-10 win seasons. And so this year it brings up the question of, okay, because their plan is to get away from that a little bit more. They're
Right.
making an effort to put in more of the modern college emphasis of the run pass option type of offense. They paid big money to get assistant coach Joe Brady, who apparently, I didn't know this till I was doing research on this, is a former Joe Moorhead disciple. So, they're making these moves to kind of update the offense a little bit more, and that's going to be interesting because we might actually see an LSU team that for the first time, basically ever, has not been a very pro style I formation. Hand it to the running back 72 times a game type of offense.
Right.
Even though they've still got the personnel for that. I mean, they return their second string from last year, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, whose last name I'm not going to, pretend to actually pronounce correctly, because there's one thing I know about myself is that I am terrible with French pronunciations. I just am. I sound like an idiot when I try to pronounce anything that is remotely French.
I mean, it's a made-up language. They sound silly talking it, so,
Exactly. So, I mean, by all accounts, they're returning, they have 7 offensive starters? Yeah, 7 offensive starters returning, including their quarterback, Joe Burrow, who was more of an RPO quarterback anyway, before he transferred in. So they're hoping
he's a solid spread option kind of guy. Very good running the ball.
I mean, he did have 7 touchdowns and 400 rushing yards last year. I mean,
it was the weirdest thing.
Yeah, it was on 3 yards a carry. So.
Yeah, most of it was just him running for his life.
Right, but he is before he transferred to LSU, he was at Ohio State, where that was more so the focus and all of that. So I don't know, it's going to be interesting. Do you think, when I think back on good LSU offenses, I honestly can only think of one. And it was, that's it. I can't think of a single like LSU offense that I look back on and I'm like, yes, that was the squad right there.
Right.
But that was the 2013 team with Zach Mettenberger, Jeremy Hill in the backfield, and then of course Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, who were the only 2 receiving targets. And so that was the only good LSU offense I can remember. Mettenberger throwing for over 3,000 yards, Hill rushing for 1,400, Odell and Jarvis Landry both with over 1,100 yards receiving. Do you think this has the potential to be a good LSU offense?
Potentially. I mean, Joe Burrow is a good quarterback. I wouldn't go so far to say he's like an elite playmaker, that he's a great quarterback. He's a good quarterback. He can make good reads. He can get the ball where it needs. Like, I think, didn't he like throw his first interception like 5 or 6 games into the year last year or something? Like, he had a ridiculous opening streak.
That's a good question. I'll do some fact checking on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was something like that. Their issue, I think, is going to be, can that guy slot in with Nick Brissett gone now? Can they get guys behind Justin Jefferson to actually step up and be consistent? Because that was the issue last year was they had Justin Jefferson and then a bunch of people who would drop balls for no reason.
Right. Yeah. It was a fairly stagnant passing game in general, which is why it was impressive. You're right. It's impressive that Joe Burrow didn't throw any interceptions until that Florida loss in Game 6.
Yeah, and then he threw 2.
And then he threw 2
in the fourth quarter. Yeah,
but then he only threw 3 more for the rest of the season. So efficient. but there's a reason why he was efficient, but also only had 16 touchdowns, at a 7-yard average, that sort of stuff.
Because he was throwing to one dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Granted, Justin Jefferson is pretty good. Like, he's a good,
he's fine.
He's a good playmaker, but
he's only a sophomore,
Yeah. But so what was so special about that 2013 team was that they had a quarterback who had a good arm, who was accurate, who was a good decision maker, but then they weren't they weren't the LSU teams that we know where there's one guy who is an elite guy on offense and then just a bunch of people from the swamp. You know what I'm saying?
They didn't have a Leonard Fournette back there.
Right.
They had his younger brother, Leonard Fournette.
Which is still weird to even try to say.
So strange to me.
Because it makes you sound like a super hillbilly who's trying to say Leonard.
Yep.
Leonard Fournette.
Leonard Fournette. Not there, Leonard.
Oh, Leonard. That's silly, Leonard.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, they didn't have that one standout guy. They might have him now in big-time running back recruit John Emery Jr. They basically got the next Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, he was what the number 2 running back in the whole country or something. He was way up there.
Yep. And of course he is a Louisiana kid because Louisiana kids do not leave the state of Louisiana unless they're quarterbacks, in which they flee. They flee Louisiana and they never look back.
Yeah. I'm if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that Felipe Franks is from Louisiana, and he was actually he was committed to them before news broke that Les Miles might be out.
Yeah, exactly.
So he flipped to Florida. But yeah, it I want to know, schools like LSU, Alabama, and Georgia always seem to have the next greatest running back, always in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's frustrating.
Yeah, it really is. Franks, by the way, was actually a Florida native.
Oh, was he? Okay.
But he had committed to LSU and then switched.
Gotcha.
So that was the only thing, is that he was not actually a Louisiana native. I don't even know if they really have quarterbacks over. Well, I know they do. All of them go to Mississippi State these days, apparently.
Every high school just plays some variant of the Wildcat,
and they just end up at Mississippi State for whatever reason. So yeah. So I mean, okay, yeah. They don't have the big names. The biggest name this year is there's the return of Joe Burrow.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Almost 2,900 yards through the air, 16 touchdowns, as mentioned. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that came through this, I don't know, very Kentucky-esque running game, where it's just give Brissett the ball as much as possible. And yeah, Brissett's going to get over 1,000 yards. If you give him the ball 240 times in the season.
Exactly.
But they don't have any one receiver that is over 1,000 yards. Jefferson under 900. Mm-hmm. Everyone else just a few hundred there. It really came down to Joe Burrow's success came down to Brissett and Edwards-Helaire, being able to grind out 4-5 yards a carry and keep pushing the line and drawing the defense in until Fournette finds an open Justin Jefferson or something like that, till Burrow finds an open Justin Jefferson. I think I said someone else's name. Anyway, so it's okay, maybe John Emery Jr. is the next big running back, but if they're trying to get away from their, main running game and they're trying to do a more, modern college spread run pass option offense.
RPO,
yeah. I mean, realistically, you think any of this could work?
Yeah. I think with a guy like Joe Burrow, it works pretty well.
In theory, it should fit him more.
Yeah, it should. We'll see. it won't go anywhere if they can't get more consistency in the wide receiver play, because you'll have Justin Jefferson and again just some dudes, and then you just have to really worry about like the run game, and that's kind of been their issue like the last couple of years is, like when like Leonard Fournette got hurt, like they struggled on offense, and that's because they haven't had wide receivers.
Yeah, exactly.
Their offensive line's good though.
Yeah, and if the offensive line continues to be good, then that'll probably help things out here because, they had a big time wide receiver recruit who was a freshman last year in Terrace Marshall Jr., who was a big time wide receiver recruit, but he didn't really play a huge amount, I don't think. I'm trying to remember now if there was a reason behind that or if they were just trying to like save him or what it may be. But, they've got to be able to have somebody step up in that regard. They've got to have Marshall step up. They've got to have some of the other returners step up. And then along with that, I mean, if you're trying to implement a new offense,
Right.
then, I mean, there's a huge – you saw it at Mississippi State last year. If we're talking about a guy who was a Joe Moorhead disciple in a Brady who's stepping in here, I almost called him John Brady, who is a different LSU legend.
Close enough. That's fine.
Yep, close enough. So Joe Brady – if he's trying to implement that, you saw how rough a transition that was on the offensive line for Mississippi State last season, who returned a bunch of starters but struggled. Who's to say that doesn't happen in Baton Rouge as well,
Yeah. I mean, we even saw it at like Florida whenever Urban Meyer left and they were transitioning from like his spread offense to Will Muschamp and his more like pro style offense. Like when you're changing over styles of offense, like the first couple of years are going to be rough because you've got players that fit the scheme, and then you're moving to, in this case, linemen who have to be more quick laterally than like straightforward, and LSU's for a couple of decades now have always gotten just big hogs up front that just push the line forward.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they do. It's just what they do well. And that's what's going to make it so interesting to me to see whether this offensive switch works at all, because I mean, they've been recruiting dudes for forever now who are not spread offense linemen, You really in the spread offense, you got to have leaner, quicker guys, and that's not who they typically have been recruiting. So that's going to be very weird to see. Weird to see. Along with that, though, I mean, I was looking again. I'd forgotten that Jamar Chase, he was another freshman wide receiver last season. He actually knotted like 300 receiving yards on the year. But he was another freshman. So Marshall and Chase, both freshmen. Jefferson, I think, is a rising junior now.
I think so, yeah.
So, yeah, Chase and Marshall are both rising sophomores. That's a young receiving core. Man, there's a lot of potential there, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot of skill there. But with young guys, there's always going to be consistency issues. And so, like can they work through that, early enough in the season to actually get their offense going?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just because you've got like the potential there does not mean necessarily that you are tapping into it immediately, or that, I mean, I just looked it up. I was trying to remember if Terrace Marshall had any like injury issues, anything like that. Not really. He just kind of was not as much of an impact player as they kind of expected in his true freshman year. So who knows? You never know when these guys who are like former 5-stars sometimes just take a little bit longer to pan out,
for sure.
and maybe never pan out at all. So if they're trying to get away from what they've been known for on offense for years and years and years throughout their history, it's going to be a weird time to do it, because yes, they do have some touted, rising young receivers that should fit well to spread the ball around a lot more in a modern spread offense, but they've still got leftovers from older schemes on the line. They've got a big time running back coming in, and Edwards-Helaire is a downhill runner as well. It's weird. It's going to be a weird transition. I'm not sure how it will pan out for him.
Right. Yep.
By all accounts, they should be good again this year because they have so much returning talent in general.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we thought last year was going to be a struggle, and it wasn't. They did really well. We thought they'd, win a lot of games or we thought they'd win a couple games that they ended up losing. Florida and A&M, ended up winning games we thought they'd lose. So this is LSU. They'll probably struggle to win 3 games this year, at this point.
They're going to be
because
terrible.
They're supposed to be good. Exactly. It's so weird. So weird. Let's look at their defense then. This is the one that I think has the bigger shoes to fill because just about every important player from last season on offense returns.
Right.
Brissett being the only guy, but truth be told, he was not a game-breaking talent. He just was a downhill runner, and they gave him the ball a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But on defense, you're losing Devin White, one of the best linebackers. He was actually the Butkus Award winner. I forgot about that.
Right. Yeah.
For best linebacker. So an incredible talent. They also are, trying to deal with some other defensive linemen that left early, stuff like that. But they return maybe the best safety in the country this season, in Grant Delpete. So what's your take on this defense who returns a lot of starters but happens to be missing some of their biggest key players from last season?
Right. Yeah. I mean, replacing Devin White's going to be basically impossible because you don't replace a guy that wins the Dick Butkus Award.
No, you do not.
You just kind of plug guys in and hope that the void isn't noticeable. And it's LSU and it's LSU defense. They had a top 5 recruiting class last year. They had a really good recruiting class the year before. So like on offense, they've got talented people everywhere. It's just a matter of how do they fill those holes?
They also return one of the greatest names in football, Michael Divinity Jr.
Just wonderful.
So good.
He's just hovering around the field. And LSU likes to call their safety or their secondary, DBU.
Yep.
Because they've always got a top 5 secondary.
I mean,
it doesn't matter what the rest of their team's doing, they've got players back there. Period.
Yeah, and just think of the pros that they've got out there right now: Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu and Tre'Davious White. I mean, it's just that's a lot of good secondary players, man.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every rotation, they've got somebody in their secondary going into the NFL, and it's not just somebody who goes in, plays a couple of years, and washes out. Like game breaking talent, they're going to be good on defense. They're always good on defense, but with them losing Devin White and having to fill some of those slots in the secondary, are they going to be an elite defense this year?
Yeah. Sorry, you can go ahead and finish that thought. I
was basically done. No, I was done.
That's the big question because it was not necessarily for a team that was always known for having, as you mentioned, DBU, but also just being a really, really good defensive team in general. They were not necessarily an elite defense last year as a defensive unit. It was not the most typical LSU defense that we've ever seen. Now part of that is because of that A&M game, inflating some of the numbers. So you can't really look at just the raw numbers.
Yeah.
Because if you look at including the A&M game, they gave up almost 22 points a game. If you take that away, take out just the A&M game, and the other 12 games, they, gave up 17 and a half.
Right.
A number that would have put them at, like, if I'm looking right, number 10 in the top 10, like, scoring defenses from last year. So still a really, really good defense. Obviously, it's top 10. But there was something about that defense that once you got past Devin White, once you got past Grant Delpete, who obviously is still there, so he's, they're not missing him there. But once you got past a lot of that, it was not necessarily a, like, stunning defense in a lot of categories.
Yeah, and part of that is because they lost. I can't remember his name. Like basically their best edge rusher in the opening game.
Yeah, Clavon Kaison.
Yeah, like he went out for the year, and honestly, that was probably their weakest spot was like off tackle, and then anything in the passing game, like 15 to like 10 yards up and out. Like they just struggled on the outside. And when you lose, your best outside player, like teams are going to try to expose that. And so they end up doing that. Like I just remember a lot of the plays in the LSU Florida game where, between, LaMichael Piron and Jordan Scarlett, they had a lot of yards rushing just off tackle. If you block Devin White, it was a good bet to get 7, 8, 9, 10 yards.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was, and this is like the big time like weirdness of LSU football and LSU defense is that, I mean, we're sitting here talking about it not being like a stunning defense. Devin White obviously was amazing. Delpete was amazing, all of that sort of stuff. So like those players fun to watch, but like it still was a, top 10 defense, excluding one game where a team scored 74 points on them.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it still was a really, and even out, with that game, they dropped down to 26, but it's still almost a top 25 scoring defense in the country last year. It's a very good defense, but we're sitting here like, but was it really like the LSU defense that we're really used to?
Yeah.
They're still giving up, 17 points a game. And I get that. I mean, this is, 2019. That's just, people are going to score points in college football. That's just how it goes. But when you're giving up, 21 points to Louisiana Tech, when you're giving up, 17 points to Arkansas and a 24-17 victory, right? Like where you're having to outscore Arkansas in order to beat them.
Yeah, exactly.
You're having to, at this point in time, I mean, Auburn was still considered to be a top 10 team, but the third week of the season, we all started to see that Auburn was not that good.
Yeah, like they had to beat Auburn on a last second field goal. And as we talked about a whole lot last year, like Auburn had zero run game and was not good passing the ball either. Like they kind of like stumbled into some wins, and it took that last second field goal to actually beat them. And they, like giving up 30 to Alabama, Alabama's really good. So, like,
right. Yeah. I mean, that's just, and it's going to be hard to, it's going to be hard on anyone to stop that. I mean, that Auburn game, Auburn was a team that didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher last season for the first time in like 20 years.
Yeah.
Like something stupid like that. And against Auburn had one player, Jatarvius Whitlow, who rushed for over 100 yards against LSU,
Yeah. He also gave up 32 to UCF, and I get that UCF is good, but 32 is a lot to give up.
Yeah. Defending national champion UCF, though.
Yeah, that's true.
So
I'm sorry, UCF.
It is a UCF team that, in case you've forgotten, by the way, a UCF team that did not have their star player, their quarterback, who was injured. So instead, they had a guy who literally threw for 97 yards. That was it. 97 yards.
And they scored 32 points.
And they scored 32 points. So I'm trying to remember now. I'm pulling up the whole thing here. I'm trying to remember. I guess they had to have, they had a running touchdown. Oh, they had an interception return in the first quarter. Really, they just kind of had like a couple of defensive plays and a bunch of field goals. I don't know. Weird game. I'd kind of completely forgotten about that entire game. But so that being said, this is an LSU defense that, by all accounts, you don't, as you mentioned, you don't replace Devin White, but if you're going to return someone as good as Delpete is as a safety, it's a great place to start. This is not a team that's losing all of their talent at once.
Right.
They get to return, as you mentioned, Kalavon Kaisan. I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, all these like French-inspired Cajun last names, I'll never be able to get it right.
The French just ruined North America
by establishing most of the Southeast. Those jerks.
Those.
Anyway, you're getting him back. You're getting Divinity back. You're getting several other secondary players. You're still returning a lot of the production on that defense. You just happen to be missing the standalone talent.
Yeah.
So the questions are going to come down to, again, okay, is the secondary as a whole going to be good enough to cover people? And is that pass rush going to be any improved to get pressure? Because that's the big question of last season. Like, was the pass rush ever enough to really get enough pressure to be productive? They had their leading pass rusher as far as sacks goes was Grant Delpete.
Right.
Their safety on a safety blitz was their leading pass rusher. Not a great sign for how your pass rush goes. That being said, they return the next two guys there, Michael Divinity Jr. and Rashard Lawrence. So there's hope, but they've got to improve that in order to and Glenn Logan, he returns as well. All three of those guys had 4 sacks. They've got to do better at that. They've got to do better in the secondary in order to really be the team that we think they should be this season, which is, they should be. Let's go ahead and say the expectations here should be another 10-win season, right?
Right. Yeah, I would think so. I'm looking at their schedule here to kind of see what they're looking like.
Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get into the schedule then. But I'm just trying to say what the expectations would be coming into the season, and I think that's what the expectations as far as talent and returning talent and everything goes is that expectations are going to be another 10-win.
Yeah, and I would say even though they did lose Devin White and they lost Brissett, there's still a lot of excitement about the talent that's kind of coming in to replace them. I would say that it's reasonable to expect that they shouldn't really take a step backwards.
Yeah, I like that. I like that assessment. Let's get into that schedule then. Last season, we were sitting around at this time going, oh my gosh, look at how rough their schedule is. Oh my gosh. It's like the total opposite this time around. Mm-hmm. They open up with Georgia Southern as the Sun Belt opponent, Georgia Southern at home. They have to go to Texas. Texas always one of those teams that you never quite know what you're going to get out of them this year. It's like is Texas back has been the question for the past 7 years.
Right.
Basically,
I feel pretty comfortable saying that they're going to be there, if not close.
Should be.
Yeah.
They were a 10-win season they were a 10-win team last season.
Yeah.
So
they're going to be a tough game, and that's real early.
Yeah, that's real early, and it's at Texas. It's not even like a neutral site game or anything.
Yep. Oh God.
But once you get past that, it's non-major opponent Northwestern State. in-state rival Northwestern State, at Vanderbilt, Utah State, and then you get to that Florida game. So you've got like 3 should be easily winnable games before you get into the bulk of your conference schedule. Florida's in Baton Rouge this year, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, but this is Florida's first game in Baton Rouge in like 4 years because of that hurricane that came through. They were looking at possibly just canceling the game, and then Florida was like, "Look, you can play us here this year. We'll like split the gate with you or whatever, and then we'll just double up like after this rotation's over."
Yeah, I had completely forgotten that.
So that'll be great.
State, yeah, it will be wonderful. It'll be so good. At Mississippi State in the 7th week of the season, Auburn in Baton Rouge, at Alabama, at Ole Miss, then Arkansas at home, Texas A&M at home, looking for revenge there. So you look at this season, I mean, it looks like it should be easier than the last one. But then again, as you just pointed out, Texas, low-key 10-win team, could actually be much more difficult an opponent than Miami of last year. What's your take on all this?
Yeah, I was reading something earlier about it was like an LSU preview. I was just kind of looking to see what like everybody was saying, and like one of the last things was like talked about LSU's daunting like road schedule. So I pulled up their road schedule, and it's like, what? You have Texas and Alabama that are really the only road teams that are like present like like a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
Like
I think they meant
state game is always going to be like.
I think they meant just the distance of having to go to Vanderbilt. Right?
Yeah, that's
like 20 people. It's just kind of mind numbing. I think that's what they meant by daunting.
Yeah, like state's going to be a little bit down this year versus last year, but like it's in Starkville. Starkville's loud as hell. It's going to be like those are always really weird games.
Yeah, and even if Mississippi State is not down, it still should be an LSU victory. I mean, based off of what is returning there. That was still a 19-3 victory from the Tigers last year. So even if Mississippi State is not down, they should still be handled.
Yeah, should, but
but you don't know because this is LSU. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Like they're at Vandy. Yeah, sure. Like at Bama, that's tough. But then they go to Ole Miss, which should be super easy, and that's their road schedule. They have 5 road games.
Yep,
that's cake. I don't understand. Yep. Yeah, so a lot of the tougher games are at home, and they've got 2 tough road games. And
yeah. I think the thing is their 2 toughest opponents probably on paper happen to be those away opponents at Texas and Alabama, with like the 3rd toughest on the schedule being a toss up between Florida and A&M, which are both at home.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So I think that does make sense to me. But yeah, it's not. It doesn't look like that daunting of a schedule from top to bottom as it did last season, where we were like, man, they could be screwed. They could be struggling to win 6 games. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I think everybody on this schedule is a guaranteed win except for Texas, Florida, and Alabama. Well, not a guaranteed win with Texas A&M, but I think that they can beat them. So that's 8 wins right there, just right off the bat, and then you figure that they could possibly pull out against Florida and Texas A&M, and that's 10 wins before the bowl game.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that they should win those 10 games. Mm-hmm. That's a should. So they should win those 10 games before the end of the regular season even comes around. Have a bowl game on top of that, which means without a doubt that they're going to win 6 games tops.
Yeah,
because that's
LSU. Go into Texas A&M needing that win to actually make a bowl game.
Right? Yeah, because that's what they do. It's when you expect them to struggle that they're just like, what do we always say? Gator voodoo, gator rituals.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Swamp magic,
all that. Yeah.
Gator rituals.
Yeah. So like it's when they got all of that going on, that they pull out all these wins and they do all those super weird stuff because that's what they do. They're super weird. So it's this season where it's like, man, they're returning a lot of people from a 10-win team. Like 15 starters total
Yeah, I think
out
it's
of the
7
22.
offense, 8 on defense. So they're looking pretty good.
Yep, and that doesn't count. Bringing in like Cade York, their upcoming kicker, who put 71 of 79 of his kickoffs into the end zone for touchbacks last season.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yep. So you got that going on. So he wasn't necessarily a starter because they had a better actual place kicker in the place, but. You're returning that much. This is absolutely the time that LSU will needlessly struggle.
Yep.
Because
just like what you said, needlessly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's going to be totally, totally unnecessary, but they'll struggle, and that, yeah. So I don't know. Here's the final question. Obviously, the SEC West is controlled by the fighting Nick Sabans out there in Tuscaloosa.
Just man, like I was so disappointed that Bama did not win the national championship because I irrationally thought that maybe if they won, Saban would be like, you know what, I've got nothing else to do here, and would leave.
Nope, not yet. Instead, he got really mad at the NFL for taking all of his defensive players.
Leave it
to hissy fit.
Leave it to this guy to actually complain about stuff like that.
Yep. I hate the fact that my players are being successful from
so
a professional standpoint. Anyway, so the West has been run by Alabama for years now. Could LSU make it a 2-team race once again?
I mean, they would need everything to go right and for Bama to struggle, which, like, if you look at Alabama, like they've looked mortal at points in the last few years. Like,
yeah,
I mean, obviously they looked real mortal against Clemson, but a lot of teams did, but like, we talked about in an earlier preview that like, Bama struggled with Tennessee for the first half. Like Tennessee, a middle school team. So like maybe they get bored one weekend of beating everybody by 30 and like LSU beats them, or I don't even know what Alabama's schedule is like, but like there's teams that could jump up and beat them for no reason, and it would be amazing.
Because this is also Alabama's schedule is really easy this year, like really easy.
Mm-hmm. Which means they'll lose to Ole Miss for no reason at all.
Right, because this is what they do. But they also are a team that, as I mentioned, they lost a lot of defensive players. Mm-hmm. Not just to graduation, but to like leaving early for the NFL, which pissed Nick Saban off so much. But so they could be vulnerable this season. Last season I thought they were invincible, going to go completely undefeated, which they almost did. They were the New England Patriots. What was that? 08, 09 New England Patriots, where they, almost went completely undefeated.
07/08, yeah.
Yeah. They were that of college football last year.
You hate to see it,
You mean see them win so many before finally losing? Yes.
And then
I hate it.
And then losing at the crux of your season, like, gosh, it's just heartbreaking,
Yes, that's exactly how I would describe how I felt. I was definitely not dancing on their graves.
But like 3 of their last 4 games are LSU at home, at State, and at Auburn.
Right. So
3 wins.
3 easy wins. I mean, like, I don't know what you're trying to say there.
Yeah. Well, I
think Auburn could be a hot mess this season. Who knows?
Auburn's probably going to be worse this year than they were last year.
Yeah, they're about to find out real real quickly how difficult it is to replace a mediocre quarterback in Stidham. So yeah, but I mean, like, I want
Gus
LSU.
Malzahn's going to get fired like 4 weeks in, right? After that
Yep.
Texas A&M game, he's out.
Yep. They're going to win it 74-72 in 7 overtimes, but they're going to fire Gus anyway. But yeah, that's just, I would love to see LSU make it a competitive West again. And this could be the year. This could be the year in which they actually really make it a competitive West.
It's their time to shine.
I mean, this is a 10-win program that finished third in the West. How wild is that? All because of that one loss to A&M.
Yeah, like I forgot about that until we started like kind of gearing back up for these previews, and I looked at the standings from last year, and I was like, LSU finished third?
Yep.
Oh yeah, it's because of that stupid game.
Yep.
Where they like showered Ed Orgeron right before they lost the game.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. That was so golden. But yeah, if LSU had beaten Texas A&M, they would have finished second in the West, and A&M would have finished fourth in the West. But instead, because of that, A&M jumped up to second in the West, and LSU slipped to third. How wild!
That's a heck of a first year for Jimbo.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Can't wait to see how they collapse from that, man.
Oh, God, it's going to be beautiful.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up our LSU preview then. A team that going into this year should be able to do a whole lot. And because of that, we'll probably do the complete opposite because that's what they like to do.
That's just what they do.
So, Keith, any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
Hope you guys have a great week.
If anyone would like to give Keith wedding advice or marriage advice, the wedding's done. Don't give him any wedding advice. He doesn't need that anymore. He won't know what to do with it.
Where do I put this?
He's already got too much of that.
Yep.
Just stuffed in a box in the corner. If you've got any marriage advice, tweet at us at ROTC Sports on Twitter. That's all we ask for this week is your marriage advice. Hey, we got one more team that we're supposed to record a preview for. Hopefully we can get it done before the season actually starts. That's the SEC East leading Georgia Bulldogs. Stay tuned, see if we're able to knock that episode out. If not, we'll see you real soon here on ROTC talking about actual football and not hypotheticals.
And probably about some Knowles.
Talking about the Knowles. Thank you for listening to Running Out the Clock, your official Talking About the Knowles podcast. That's Keith. I'm your friend Joseph Craven. On behalf of all the people at home who could not join us tonight, such as Roan Hunter and Chandlar Rombalongs, we'd like to thank you again. Good night.